Hello and welcome back. I hope you are learning from this course. And if you have any question, doubt or suggestion, feedback, please do ask your question. Okay, so let's get started with this lecture. So in this lecture we are going to learn about field validation, how we can do field validations using JSTL, JSP and servlet. Okay, so that's what we are going to. Let me tell you what we are going to do. When suppose user need to fill these three fields, name, email ID and password. What user is doing, he is not entering the name, he is just entering the email ID and password, and he is clicking on add user. So what will happen? It should ask the user to please enter the required field, or please enter all the mandatory fields. Okay, so that's what called field validation, and that's what we are going to do. So let's do it through Java. Okay, so in this project I'm going to use post method, so I'll remove this. Okay, to get, okay, so remove unnecessary code. So now we have this only do post method here. Okay, so let me remove this as well. So we are going to do a field validation. Let me go to the JSP and let you know what we did earlier. So here we are taking input as text for name, email and password. Okay, and this we are passing to this URL, add user URL, through this post method, and thus this add user URL is mapped to this servlet URL, that is add user. And in this way, from now, since I'm using the post method, I can use the servlet context to get these values inside a servlet, inside this servlet. Okay, so now inside this add user I can get these values through request.get parameter, because those values are getting attached to the request or the context, so we can get those values from the request. Okay, so I'll create a variable here, string name, and I'll use request dot get parameter, and here the parameter name which we have given inside the JSP, it was name. Okay, so I'll use name, and in the same way what I do, I'll copy paste, and here the second one is email, so I'll use email, and here I'll give the name email. Okay, and the next is password, so here I'll give variable name as password, and here also it is password. So this name, email and password should be the same as we have given in JSP here. So name, email and password. So if you are giving something like email ID here, you have to give the email ID same name in the add user dot java. Okay, so you have to give the email ID same thing. Okay, so I'll remove the ID, I'll make it ID in both the places. Sorry, the project is getting built. Okay, so now we are getting these three values through request dot get parameter will give the values which user has entered through that form. Okay, so let me put a sys out here, and I'll print this value. Okay, so name, I'll put name. Okay, then I'll print email. So what I'm doing, whatever the values we are entering through the form, I'm getting here and I'm printing to the console. Okay, so let me run for these two value. Okay, So let me enter Sunil, email ID also sunil@sunil.com something, and password something. Okay, so click on add user and see here we are getting the name as Sunil, email ID as sunil@sunil.com, and okay, so we have not printed the password, so it is not showing. This means we are getting the values from the request correctly. Okay, so let me go back to the servlet. So now we are getting the value. Next thing, we need to put a validation. So what we do, I'll write a if condition here, and what this if condition will do, I will check. I'll write else as well. Okay, so what I write inside the if, I'll simply check a condition if name is equal to null. So if name is null, if user is not entering the name, it is null, or name dot equals empty. Okay, so since it is a string, we need to check the both null and empty string. Okay, so that's why I'm checking name equal to null or name dot equals empty string. So here basically I'm checking whether user has entered some value or not. If user is keeping the field as empty, it will be null. Okay, and then similarly I'll check for email. So I'll check email equal to null or email dot equals empty string, or I'll check for password as well. Okay, password equal to null or password dot equals empty. So now we are checking if name is null, if email ID is null, if password is null. If it is null, what we need to do? We need to call the request and we need to set the attribute. So request dot set attribute, and here what attribute name I'll give error, because if it is null, we need to show user that you are doing something wrong, some error message we need to show. So I'll set the attribute as error and I'll give the message all fields are required. Okay, so this is the simple message I want to show when user is not filling fields. Okay, so now once this is done, we are setting this error attribute to the request. Next thing we need to do, we need to tell the request that it need to dispatch this to some page. So I want to be on the same page, so what I do, I will remain on the same page. For that we need to use the request dispatcher. Okay, through request dispatcher we can dispatch the request to some page. Okay, so I'll create a object for this, and with get servlet context I will get the get request dispatcher. Okay, and inside this I'll keep the page name where I want to send this request. Okay, so here I'll give users.jsp. I want to remain on the same page. We need to import. Next thing is we need to use this object to pass the request and response. Sorry, we need to forward it to request and response. Okay, so we are basically forwarding this request dispatcher object through this request and response that we are getting here. Okay, so let me test this. So let me go back, let me refresh the application, and here let me click on add user. So see here, now we are getting the name and email as empty here since we have not entered anything. So now we are not getting any message on the UI because we have written everything inside the servlet. So now we need to show this error, this message on the UI. How we can do that? That's what we are going to do in the next lecture inside this JSP page. Okay, so see you in the next lecture where we'll be writing this JSP to show the error message on the UI. So see you in the next lecture. So we have written the servlet part of the validation logic. Let's write the same thing to show the validation message on the JSP. So for that, what I do, I'll write some code here inside this main div. Okay, so what I do, I'll use C:if test, and for test what we are going to use, dollar bracket, will use request scope because we have set the value here to the through the set attribute to the request scope, that is error. So this value we are going to take inside the JSP and will be showing this message, right? So request scope dot error if it is not equal to null. If request scope dot error is not equal to null, we need to show a message to the user that something is wrong. So let me close this. So this is the if statement in JSTL. So C:if test, and here this is the value we are getting from the request scope for error. So that is coming from here. So if name, email and password, any of these three values is null, this error will be set to this message, and this message we will be showing in the JSP through this. Okay, so now we have this. If it is null, we need to show this. So I'll use a strong, I'll use style. I'm using strong and style to show message in a color. If it is success, I'll show in a green, and if it is error, we'll be showing in the red. Okay, we'll show the message in red. I'll close the strong, and inside this we'll be using C:out, and here we'll be showing the value of the error. So that also we get from the request scope dot error, and we'll close this, and we close the Cout. So here we are checking if request scope dot error is not equal to null. That means if it is null, we'll show this message. So let us test this. So for that we need to run the application. So run on server, click on finish, restart the server. So server is getting started. Okay, so now if I don't put anything and click on add user, it should show us the error message. So see here, now it is showing all fields are required. So this is the message we have set inside this servlet, and from this servlet we are passing this message to this error, and this error we are getting through the request scope here and checking its value. If it is not null, then we are showing the value through Cout. Okay, so this, from here we are showing the message. Okay, so see here, now we are getting the message all fields are required. And what if we set the value correctly? For that, what I do, I'll just copy this and I'll paste it here, and I'll make it success. success, and I'll put this red to green, and here error to success. So now this message, success message, will be shown when we will be adding all the fields. So for that we need to write the else here. Okay, so for this what I do, I'll just copy this. Okay, so instead of error I'll put this success and also users added or user added. Okay, for now. Okay, we'll change the message later. Now we are just showing the message, and I'll copy this to forward the page to the users.jsp. Okay, so now let's run this. So if I run now, it will show us. So let it build correctly. Now what I do, I'll add all the fields. Okay, and I'll add password. So now all three fields I'm adding, and I'm clicking on add user. See here it is showing us the message in green, user added. So this is the advantage of using JSTL. We can show the error message on the same form. See here all fields are required because I have not adding here. Suppose I'm not adding email, it will show. Suppose I'll add all the fields, it will show us the users added. Okay, and if I miss, it will show us all fields are required. So it is so nice to see at the error message on the same page without page being reloaded. Okay, so this we are doing through this simple JSTL logic that we are testing here, and through this servlet where we are setting the value for error and success. Okay, so in the next lecture what we do, we will be here in the else part. When we are adding all the fields through the form, then it will come to the else part. What we do, we'll take all these values, name, email and password, and we'll try to convert that to a DB object, and we will save that into the MongoDB. So see you in the next lecture where we'll be writing the DAO class. Hello and welcome back. So in this lecture I'm going to write a DAO class, and I'm also going to write the else part where we will get all the data, that is name, email and password, from the JSP form, and try to forward that data to store inside the MongoDB database. So let's create a class with the name user.dao. So I'll create a class, and the package I'll give com.hyoursuccess.mongodb.dao. So all the DAO classes I'll store inside the DAO package. Okay, and here I'll keep the class name as user.dao, data access object class. Okay, and I click on finish. So this is our class inside the package DAO. So now what this DAO class will do, it will connect to the MongoDB, and it will try to convert the whatever user data we are getting from the model class, that is user.java. So here in the add user.java we are getting the values from the JSP, and then what we do, we'll set these values through this model class to this user.java user object, and then with this we will forward it to user.dao. Okay, so let us first write the else part here. So for else part what I do, I'll create a user object, I'll get it a name u and new user. Okay, so I'll create an user object for the model class. So it will ask us to import, so import the so now we have the user object here. Now what I do, I'll use u.setName. So we have this set methods for use email ID, name and password. So for that I'll use set name and I'll pass this string value that we are getting from the JSP. Okay, in the same way I'll use dot set email, and for email I'll use the email this value, and in the same way I'll use dot set password, and for password I'll use password. Okay, so now we have all these three values assigned to this user object. Next thing is we need to pass this user object to the DO class. Okay, so for that what I do, I'll use the user DO. I'll create an object for user DO and can pass it like this. Okay, import it. Okay, so we can do like this, but here what I do, because we are getting this will be the an Java object. Okay, but to store the value in the MongoDB we need to convert this to a database object. Okay, so for that what I need to do, I need to convert that to the DB object. Okay, for that we'll do, but let me do one more thing. To connect to the MongoDB we need to have the Mongo client in place. So I'll create a Mongo object for Mongo client and I'll use request dot get servlet context, and with this I'll use get attribute. So with get attribute what we need to give, we need to give the Mongo underscore client. Okay, so this will get from the request. So now it will ask us to import. So let's import, and then it will ask us to cast. Okay, so I'll cast it to Mongo client. So now this Mongo object is there. This is required to connect to the MongoDB. I'll pass this to user DO. Okay, and so that whenever we'll initialize the user DO class, it will get initialized and MongoDB connection will be established. So I'll come to user DO, and here what I do, I will create I'll create the constructor for the user DO, and inside the constructor I'll pass this Mongo. Okay, import it. Okay, so now I'm taking the value for user DO inside the constructor. Okay, and to connect to MongoDB we need another class, that is I'll create an property for the DB collection. I'll create an object for this DB collection.call. Okay, let me import this. So DB collection, this is required to connect to the MongoDB database. Now what I do, I'll use this call to connect to the MongoDB. So I'll use this Mongo that we are getting from the add user. So Mongo dot get DB, there is a method called get DB, and here we can give the users DB database name which you want to give. Okay, dot collection name which you want to give, and collection name will give users. Okay, so with this DB collection we will connect to the users DB, and this database, if it is already there, it will insert this collection inside this database, and if it is not there, it will create this database and then this user collection inside the database. Okay, so now we have the data part done. Next thing what I need to do, I need to create a method, public create user. Okay, so I'll use create user method, and in this method what I do, I'll take this user object that we are passing from add user here. Okay, so this user object. Okay, so I'll use user DAO dot something wrong here. Okay, here I need to define the type, so it will be user. Let me import. Okay, it is asking to return type will be user. Sorry, it should be small public. Let me import this. Okay, so now it is got resolved. Okay, so we are creating a method of type user, and we are taking the user object and we are returning the user object. I'll tell you why I'm creating this. Let me go to the add user here. Here through this user, what I do, I'll call this create user and pass this user object. Okay, so from here what I'll take this user object which will be containing this name, email and password, and I'll call this create user method. Okay, so now I'll come to the user DAO, and here what I do, now we need to do a task. That task will be, we need to convert this user object to the DB object, and for that we'll use the DB object. I'll create an object for this. I'll call it doc, and I'll user converter. Okay, I'll create this class dot to DB object, and I pass this object u to this. Okay, and then let me import com.mongodb. Now it will ask us to create the user converter class. So let me create the class. In this class I'll create in I'll call the converter. Okay, so now we have this user converter class. So let me explain before I write this. Okay, so let me explain what I did till now. I have used this user object to set the values for name, email ID and password which we are getting from the JSP, and then I created the Mongo client object, and through the request I'm getting the attribute Mongo client, and then I have called the user DAO and I passed the Mongo this object to the user DAO constructor, so that it will, when this user DAO will created, it will get initialized, and then through this user DAO I'm calling the create user method and passing this user object. Okay, and then I'm coming to user DAO and I'm calling the DB collection, and through this user DAO I'm calling this get DB mongo.getDB.get collection to connect to the MongoDB database and collection, and then I'm creating a create user method and I'm passing the user object to this, and then I'm trying to convert this user object to the DB object. Okay, for that we have created a class user converter that we are going to write in the next lecture. So let's write the user converter. So what this user converter will do, it convert the user object to the DB object and DB object to the user object. So we'll write one method to convert the user to DB object, and we will be writing one more method to convert the DB object to user object. While retrieving the data, we'll convert the DB to user, and while inserting data will convert user to DB. So for now we are converting to DB object, and that's why we have created this class user converter, and we have created this object created this method to DB object, and we are from here we are calling this user converter dot DB object to DB object method, and we are passing this user object. Okay, so let's see what we can write here. So this method is of type DB object, which is of type static. Okay, So inside this, what we need to do, we need to convert this user object to the DB object. So for that we need to use the basic DB object builder. So this basic DB object builder is a class which helps us to build the DB object in MongoDB, and for this we'll create an object and we'll give it a name builder and basic DB object builder. Okay. We'll use basic DB object dot, we'll use the start to start building the object. Okay. And then with this, what we do, we will start appending the key and value. So here the key which we want to give inside the MongoDB database, that will be name, and the value will get from the model class, that is from this user u.getName. Okay. So let me separate this append here. Dot append, we'll use the another one, that is email, and for email we'll use u.getEmail, and then the third one dot append will be the password, and for password we'll use u.get password. Okay, and we'll close this with semicolon. Okay, only one is sufficient. Okay, so what we are doing, we are creating an object for basic DB object builder, and with this what we are doing, we are appending the values, key and value, that we want to insert into the database. So key we are giving name, email and password, and value we are getting from the model object, that is u.getName, u.email and u.password. Okay, now we need to return something here. Okay, so for that, before returning, we need to check whether we are getting the ID or not, whether the object is created or not. So for that we'll check here, if u.getID not equal to null, if ID is not null, when you insert data in MongoDB, it will automatically create the ID for us. Okay, we'll use builder equal to builder dot append, and here the key will be underscore ID that MongoDB will create for us. Okay, and value will be new object ID, and that we get from u.getID. Okay, here it is asking us to do something. Let's see. Okay, we'll import Bison. We know because MongoDB store data in the Bison format, that's why it is asking us to import this org.bison.types.object_id, because object ID is of Bison type. Okay, and now here instead of returning null, we'll return builder.get. So when you use builder dot, you'll see there is a get method that will create the DB object. So we'll return the builder.get, that will return us the DB object. Okay, so now what process we are following, we are getting the users.jsp. Through this we are taking the name, email and password through a form, and then we are submitting this through a post method with this URL, and then it is coming to add user.java, that is a servlet, and here we are doing the validation, simple validation for field here, and then in the else part we are creating the Mongo object, and we are calling the user DO, and we are passing the Mongo and user object here, and then we are coming to user DO. Here we are through the constructor we are establishing the connection with the database and creating a collection, and then we are creating a method, that is user method, and we are taking the user object value here, and then we are calling the user converter through this DB object, and we are calling this toDB object to convert this user object to the DB object, and then we are coming to user converter and this toDB object method, and through this basic DB object builder we are building the DB object. And what we are doing, we are simply giving the key and value pair. So key we are giving here in name, email and password, whatever value you want to give you can give, and here we are giving the value through that we are getting through this object, user object u.getName, and then we are checking whether the ID is null or not, the data has been created and inserted into DB or not. If it is there, we are appending the ID with the ID, and then we are getting the object here. So now we have the flow ready. Let's run this project. Before running this project, we need to start the MongoDB server. So in the next lecture, I'm going to run this full application by starting the MongoDB server and by starting the project server and deploying the project. Okay, so see you in the next lecture. We'll be seeing the end-to-end running this application. See you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. So in this lecture we are going to run our application and we are going to add a user. Okay, so before that I forget to do one thing. We are building the DB object here. So we are converting the user object to DB object here, and we are returning the DB object. Okay, so now in the DAO class I need to insert this DB object into the MongoDB database, and that part is 3 lines of code that I need to write here. So I need to use this .call.insert. Okay, and I have to pass this doc. So okay, so this document I need to pass so that this collection object will insert this document into the MongoDB. Next thing is we need to set the object ID. So we are not inserting the object ID, MongoDB will create the object ID, and for that reason we have to create an object ID, and then we need to use this doc.get. Okay, get string, and string will be underscore ID that MongoDB will generate for us. Okay, now we need to do 2 things. We need to cast this object ID, and we need to import this object ID from the Bishon, because this will be the Bishon document. Okay, so that is done. Next thing is we need to set this to user object u to use dot set ID, and we need to pass the ID. Okay, now we need to convert this ID to string. Okay, so for that we need to use the toString to convert this ID to string. So for that I'll use id dot toString. Okay, so now that is done, and then we'll return the user object. So now it's done. We have written the user converter do and add user. we have listener class there that will initialize the MongoDB properties. So let's run this application and insert the first user. Okay, before that let me start the MongoDB server. So to start MongoDB server, you need to use MongoD db path, and we need to give the path where we want to store the data. Okay, so now MongoDB server has started. Next thing is we need to open the another command prompt, and here we need to connect to Mongo. Why I'm doing this? Because I want to show you that we are not having this user DB created already. Okay, if it is created, we will delete that. So we'll use show dbs. See here, it's already there, users DB. So what I do, it's users DB. Yeah. So what I do, I'll use users DB, and then I'll use db.top. Okay, so now we have dropped this database. So let me run the command show dbs. So here, so now we do not have the users DB database. Let me okay. So see here, now we do not have any database with the users DB. So let's run this application. So I'm starting the server now. Once the server is started, our application will be running on the server. So this is okay. So here I'm going to insert the first user. I'll use my name Sunil, and I'll use something sunil@sunil.com something, and then we'll use the password something. I'll type randomly, and when I click add user, it should add this information to the MongoDB database. So click on add user, and here you'll see the message users added. So let's go to the DB, and here what I do, see here, now we do not have the users DB database. So let me run the command so dbs to see whether database has been created or not. See here, users DB is there. So I'll switch to this database, and I'll use so collections. Okay, so now users collection is there. This is because here in the user do.java class we have given the database name as users DB and collection name as users. That's why we are seeing a users collection here, and I'll query this to see the information which you have entered through the JSP form that has been entered or not. So db.users.find and hit enter. See here, we have entered the name Sunil, email and password, all these three information along with the object ID that has been created by MongoDB database automatically. So this way we can, let me add one more user. Suppose I want to add John @something.com and some password. So let's see whether John is being added or not. So let's go to the database, and run the command, and see here John has been added. Okay, so now our application and our project is successfully running and we are able to add the user. In the next lecture we are going to see how we can display the user on this same page. When I click on add user, it will show user added and we'll see the list of user below that. So see you in the next lecture. So welcome back. So in this lecture what we are going to do, when we try to add user here, we will try to see all the users that has been already added to our MongoDB servers are listed below here in a tabular format. So let me add some users. So first thing I'll add Sunil @gmail.com, some password, and click on add user. Okay, so see here, now it is coming here. So as soon as I have added the user, it is being displayed here. In the same way, if I want to add Ramesh and email ID something and password, and when I click on add user, see now both the users are being shown in a tabular format. Okay, so this logic we are going to understand. So I'm not going to write, I'm going to explain. I have already written and I'll explain, because writing is taking a lot of time and we have done all the basic things till now, so we are ready to move. Okay, so let me tell you first thing what we need to do. We need to write a JSP. So for that I have written the user list logic here. So for first thing, if the user is not empty, okay, so if this request scope.users, if users is having some values, then only this table will be shown. Okay, that's why when the first time the application is getting loaded, it is not being shown anything. Okay, so here we are creating a table, we are creating a caption, and then table body, table row, and this is the column name, ID, email ID, password, edit and delete. Okay, so this edit and delete we'll understand later. For now what we are doing, so till here we are creating the heading for the table, and here we are writing the logic for C colon for each items in the users. So in this request scope.users, this will be the list when we have more than one user. So that's why we are using for each, and then if it is having values, for each value what we are doing, we are printing the user ID, name, here ID and user ID. So we are getting ID from the user, this request scope. Okay, and then okay, this part I'll explain later. This we are taking for editing and deleting, that will do in the next lecture. Okay, so for editing and deleting we are getting the ID so that we can fetch the data from that ID. Okay, and here what we are to print the values on the table, we are using user.id, user.name, user.email and password. I'm not printing. Okay, and then here we are giving the edit and delete buttons. Okay, a link for editing and deleting the user details. So for that we are defining the URL, edit URL and delete URL. This thing we will discuss in the next lecture. So this is the table that we are creating, that is being displayed here. It is not coming properly in this Eclipse or STS, so let me run it in a browser so that this table will be visible correctly. Okay, so I'll open this in the browser. Okay, so it is open now. See here, now I'll add one more user. Suppose I'm adding John, and some password for john@something.com and some password. Okay, and click on add user. See here, now it is saying the registered user and it is giving all the details: ID, name, email, password, and here we are seeing the link for editing and deleting that we are going to do in the next lecture. So let me explain what else we need to do. So we have seen what we have done in users.jsp. We need to add something in the add user.java servlet also. So here what I'm doing, I'm creating a list of type user. Okay, so I'm creating a users list of the type user and I'm calling the user.do object and I'm calling this read all users method. So this we need to write inside the users.do.java. So what is this? This is the method of type list user type. Okay, and in this what I'm doing, I'm creating a user list, array list of user, and I'm using the db cursor. Db cursor is the cursor which will enable us to iterate the data inside the document of a MongoDB table or collection. So collection.find, and it will cursor will be there on the document or on the collections document. Okay, and with this we can use the while cursor.hasNext will check whether the collection is having more document or not, and it will db object will use the db object and create the document and cursor.next. Okay, so this all the documents will be there in the doc, and then we'll call the user, we'll create the object for the user class and we'll pass it, call the user converter dot to user. So this is the db, this is the db document. Okay, now because we are getting this from the cursor, now we need to convert this to the user object. For that we need to write the toUser method in the user converter. So we'll go to user converter and we'll write a method to convert this db object to user object. So we'll take the db object doc, and what we do, we'll create an object for the user and we'll use user.setName, set email, set password, and we'll use this doc.getName. So with this document we'll get the name and convert that to the user object. And once done, what we do, we will get the object ID as well from the document, and then we'll set this to string and we'll return the user object. So from this toUser we'll get this user object which will contain all these values. Okay, and then we'll come to the user.do and we will get the values inside this object, and then this will add to this list. So now all the values will be there in the data list and this list will return. So when we call from this add user here, user.do.read all users, it will come here and it will get this data. Okay, data list. So now this user is having this data list, user list, and here what we do, request.set attribute will set to the users, and from here what we do, we'll go to the JSP and JSP will get the user's detail from the request scope and it will show us on the form. So same thing is happening here. Let me show you again. I'll add one more user. Suppose I'll add Suresh and something and password something. If I add user, it will show us the detail. Okay, so in the next lecture we'll see how we can edit this. When we click on edit, it should pop up the data here, this data. Suppose this row I want to edit, so this Sunil and Sunil email ID and password should pop up here, and then this add user should be converted to the edit user, and when I click on edit, the data should be updated. Okay, so in the next lecture we are going to do this. And if you guys have any doubt, please ask me. I'm going to add the source code now to the lecture, so that you can download this source code and try your hands on this project. Okay, so I'm going to add this source code so that you can download it and you can start working on it. See you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. So till now what we have done, we have written code to add a user inside MongoDB, and then when we click on add user, along with adding the user, it will also show the list of registered users that have already been registered to our application. So see here, now it is showing the list of users. So we have seen till add user and view all the users till now. Okay, so in this lecture I'm going to show you, when I click on edit user, it will pop up the fields with the details which we have inserted, like Ramesh and email ID and password, and then we can modify that and it will get updated in real time. Okay, so for that what we need to do, we have already added the code for edit request in JSP in the previous lecture. It is nothing but the same form which we will be sending through a form action, and we are sending the edit URL value here, edit URL for servlet, and through post method, and this thing we are getting the user ID, name, email and password from the request scope, and then we are submitting the form edit user. Okay, in the same way I have also written the code for delete user. For delete user we are calling the servlet delete user. Okay, that also we will write in this. Okay, so now we need to write the servlet so that when we submit this form edit request, it will look for this edit URL that we are defining here. Where is it? Let me show you. See here, so variable is edit URL and it will look for the / edit user. So for that what we need to do, we need to write a servlet. So I have written a servlet edit user. So you can create a servlet class, and inside that we have to give the @web servlet edit user. So when we click on the edit from the web page, it will come to this servlet and it will look for this path and it will come here through the post method, and then we need to write the simple things here. What I'm doing, if ID is null, because we are going to edit, so we are going to edit with respect to the ID. So we'll compare, we'll fetch the data from the database from ID, because ID is the unique field in our documents or a collection. Okay, so if it is null, we will throw the exception ID is missing. Okay, so ID is required for edit operation, and then we will try to connect to the MongoDB by calling the Mongo client, and then we will be initiating the instantiating the user DAO class, and we are passing the Mongo object here so that we will get connected to the MongoDB, and then we will create an object for user class, and with that we will set the ID and we will call the read user so that we can get all the details from the user or from database. And then here what I do, I'll set the attribute to user. Okay, so whatever we are getting from database, from this read users, we will set the attribute to the user so that we can get it in the JSP. Okay, and then we will create a list of user type and we'll read all the users, and then we'll assign it to the set the attribute to the users. Okay, and then we will redirect to the JSP. Right now, when we come to the post method, here what we will do, we will get the parameter ID. Okay, and we'll check again whether it is null or not. If it is null, we will throw the exception. Okay, and then what we do, from the request we will get the parameter name. These are we are getting from here. We have set the attribute to users by read all users, so all the details will be there in the users. Okay, so from the request scope we will get the values here in the post method. So we'll get the request.get parameter name, email and password. Okay, simple system.out.println, that is not required to test. And then here we'll check whether name is null or empty, or email. We'll check whether all the fields are there or not. Okay, so if it is null, any of this field is null, we'll set that name, email or password cannot be empty. Okay, and then we will usually call the user DAO, and we will try to connect to the MongoDB through by passing the Mongo to the user DAO. And then we will, what we will do, we'll set the ID, name, email and password to the user object, and then we will set it to the user attribute, and then we will set the users and we'll redirect to the JSP. And what we are doing in JSP, we are getting the value from the request and setting to the field. See here, request scope.user.name, so we will get the name, all those details. Okay, so we need to write the one more method, that is update user. So we need to write the update user method in the user DAO, because here we will set the ID, name, email ID and password, and then we'll pass it to the update user method that I have written in user DAO. So this is read user that we need to write. Here we are just querying with the respect of ID, basic DB object builder, and we are appending the ID, and we are trying to get the all the information associated with this ID. Okay, and then we are creating an DB object and finding the, with respect to this query, passing the ID and getting the required information, and then we are returning the to the user. So this is the DB object we are returning through user converter. We are converting it to the user, and then we'll write the update user, where again we'll write the query based on the underscore ID field, and then we will use this .call.update and we'll pass this query and user converter dot to DB object. So this query will have the data in the form of user object, so we will convert that to the DB object and it will get updated to the database. In the same way, we will also write the delete user, which will have the user object as a parameter, and again the query with respect to the underscore ID, and then we'll use the MongoDB method remove and pass the query, and that particular particular document with underscore ID, the ID which we are providing will be deleted from the database. So this is what we need to do. Okay, so now we have all the things ready. Let me show you edit user. We have seen already. Here we are passing the user object to the update user. Okay, and same way we'll write the delete user, where we'll be adding the web servlet / delete user. So when we click on the delete link, it will come here and it will check all those things, if it is null or not, and throw the exception, and then it will set the ID to the user object, and then it will call the delete user, and by passing this id to the delete user method, and then delete user here will query the database, and with the remove method it will delete the user. Okay, and then once it is coming back from the delete method, it will set the attribute to success, and here we'll use delete user deleted successfully, and we will list all the other users. So we'll create the list again of user, and we'll call the method read all users. So all the remaining users will be listed here, and we'll redirect our request to the user.jsp. So it will be showing all the other users which are there. So let run this application. So run on server, and click on finish. Restart the server. Okay, so now application is ready, the server has started. So let's add something, john john.com, and password something, and I'll try to add. See here, it is showing user added successfully, and it is showing see here John is here, and it is also showing all other users that are there in the database. And when I try to edit, click on edit, see here John detail has popped up. So let me modify John. I'm writing John and John123 at email ID, and I'll edit. So now it is John and John @John. It should be John. So see here, now it is showing John and John123. So it is getting edited or updated correctly. So let me delete this Ramesh, the first document, our first entry. Click on delete, and see here, now that has been deleted. Let me delete the first John, that is John here, delete, and see here that has also been deleted. Let me edit the John to some other name, Shway, and something. Okay, see here, now John has been edited to this way. And let me delete the Sunil entry, the second one. See here now, so it is seamless. We can start adding a new user, some password, username, email ID, and some password, and click on add, and see here, immediately we are getting the updated user list. We can start deleting, we can start editing, whatever. Okay, so this way this project is completed. We have seen how to add, how to edit, and how to delete, and how to list all the users from the MongoDB through Java. So I'll try to add more projects in this course. For now it is good, and next project I'll add that will be having some session management thing. So we'll try to create a profile kind of application where we can log in, we can manage our profile, and we can sign in and sign out. Functionality will be there. Okay, so see you in the next project that I'll be adding soon. Thank you.